hello everyone. It is, I don't have my phone here, so I'm close. No, it's July 5th. All right, July 5th, 2017. For those of us in the United States, we got through the 4th of July, and blessedly here in our local area, it's been so dry that there was a fireworks ban. So there were no fireworks, which is good because my dog is terrified of them. And it was a nice, quiet thing. And then, of course, a big extravaganza in our local townships around here was over the weekend. So the 4th was really calm. And happy Canada Day, you Canadians out there, 105th anniversary of Canada. Yay, Canada. Woo! You guys are great. You're like us a lot, but you're just nicer. So in many ways. So anyway, I love Canada. So let's talk about this stuff. And hi, Doug. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Nice and relaxed today. Had a good day off yesterday.
Good, good. And let's see. Well, there's so much to talk about. I guess the next thing we're releasing are the Call of the Heart. Yeah. Anyway, one of the cool things that we've been doing around here is we scan, or Pam does principally. Otherwise, it'd be like blues music or something like that, or jazz. But she listens to a lot of music, and then she finds music that's really beautiful and meditative. And then she'll contact the people that write it, and we do some kind of deal, licensing or whatever. And then we put in our Biofield stuff and our entrainment stuff with this music. And so the next thing that's coming out is called, the original name in Scandinavian, what was something about troll music or something like that?
Yeah, something about troll moors.
Yeah. Anyway, so the first song is the troll mother is singing to her 11 troll babies. That's what the theme is, and it's in Scandinavian, so you don't understand it. I don't understand it, but it's absolutely gorgeous. And so, so they're just these beautiful songs that have this powerful entrainment stuff, and so they're really, really nice, just like very brief meditations. Because the music itself is just compelling and beautiful, and then add this technology to it, it really takes you to a really deep place. And I was listening to that this morning. It was really good. And then Doug is a designer. You don't have the
I do. I think I can show it.
I got to share this with you. This was the ideas for the new release.
Yeah, first you have to understand this is just absolutely gorgeous music, and if you haven't heard it yet, you're going to love it when it comes out. Lee did a really good job adding Theta entrainment to it, and the Biofield is all about heart and heart opening, and it's just really powerful, and one of my favorite things I've heard in a long time. Anyway, John was explaining about the troll lullabies, so I did this as a draft of the cover for you, if you can. Let's see. There we are. Y'all see that?
There it is. And it says, yeah.
You'll smile, you'll heal, you'll probably cry.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what we do here. We're creative moms. Anyway, nice job. And the other ones are really beautiful too, but that was my favorite, of course, and that's probably the one that will not make the cut. So, yeah. Well, I've been prior to this, I was answering a bunch of emails that people send in and ask questions, and they're all really good questions for the most part. Every once in a while, we'll get a troll, but God loves trolls too, so you got to deal with that. And maybe we could just open up. If anybody has any comments and questions they'd like to ask, just go ahead and do it, and we'll roll with that. And if not, we can riff on something else.
Yeah. If anybody does have a question, you can post it here in the chat box, or you can just turn on your video in the lower left, and we're happy to answer anything you guys have a question about. And looks like radio silence so far, so perhaps we should so John, how's practice?
Yeah, how's practice? Well, let's see. Practice is pretty good. Yesterday, played tennis with Pam, and I was beaten 6-2, I think. Yeah, which is pretty bad whooping. Then we played 3 more games because just to play, and I won the 2 out of the last 3. Anyway, Pam is at a pretty good level now with her tennis, and mine is not quite as good as hers, but we go up and down. So we're very competitive, you know. So that's fun, and yeah, and as far as practice, you know, which is what I'm always talking about. It's what the new book that Doug and I are writing about is it's integral practice, and you know, basically to get yourself into the zone and be as healthy and optimal as possible, you have to do about as much time and effort working on your physical body as you do your interior self. Okay, so you have to put those 2 things together, and that is it's really a revolutionary thing, you know, because we've discovered so much about exercise in the last, you know, several decades. And I mean, the science is, I mean, there's all kinds of great books. There's one book, Younger Next Year, about exercise, and then one for people, then for men and women and stuff like that. And they say that rigorous exercise can roll back the clock, your aging clock, at least 10 years, if not more. And that's you know, that's really significant. And you spend that much time in working in your interior self, and of course the interior and exteriors are intimately connected, and all this stuff starts to, so your exercise helps you to meditate more and go deeper, and your meditation helps you to focus better, be happier, and be more skillful in whatever athletic activities you're doing, whether it's martial arts or tennis or qigong, or just in the gym doing strength training or running, anything. It just gets better. So it's been hard to kind of get the word out to the athletic world, but we're, you know, it's kind of a sealed community, but we're working on it. And if they will start paying equal attention to the interior game of the athletes and the brain entrainment, you know, and working through your stuff. And of course, I mean, every in the sports news every day is talking about these great athletes whose lives have hit the rocks because of addiction or because of other issues, and all that great talent is never fully expressed because they haven't taken care of other parts of them that need to be taken care of. And yeah, so it's an integral game. It's a completely holistic game that we have to play, and it's really fun. And so yeah, I've been practicing a lot. On by the way, my birthday was on the 3rd, 61 years old, and anyway, so I always do, you know, New Year's and birthdays or something is a time to increase practice. And quite frankly, on not today but yesterday, I did like a 2-hour and 45-minute meditation, and a lot of it was really painful. You know, it's like, again, I say, not all the stuff is blissful. A lot of times, in my case, I'm called to deal with pain, deal with shadow, deal with hurt, not just my own, but, you know, collectively. And so it's just, the practice is just to stay with it, you know, stay with and bless it and be with it, you know. And it's not always that way, but sometimes it is that way. And when that happens, is to realize that that's a grace, that's a blessing, you know, that's a teaching, and that's a learning, and not to go, oh my God, these are supposed to be happy sounds. And well, no, they're supposed to be transformative sounds. And any transformative path that does not include the darkness and the shadow and the pain is bullshit, basically, and it will not work, and it's eventually going to cause more pathology than you started out with, because it's bypassing the parts that really need to be brought into awareness and consciousness, and it just strengthens the unconscious power of all the stuff that we're that we're not aware of, that causes us pain and hurt. You know, and that can be individual, that could be, you know, your family stuff, or it could be, you know, your country's karma, or it could be the whole, you know, the whole species. So you know, when you get down into these deeper levels of meditation, it just gets immense. You know, you get into all kinds of stuff, and I think that is a shadow element that has to be included in our practice. And I think with diligence and with time and discipline, that the stuff emerges, and you have a real viable practice. And you also, thank God, you get these doshin, I think the experiences states of non-duality and great liberation, where you are identified with everything, you know. I mean, and that's kind of the deepest part of meditation. Okay. And so, you know, when people say, well, what is meditation, you know, for? What does it do? Well, there's vast answers to that, because people are sometimes working on, you know, just different stuff, and they're developmentally, there are different levels in their journey, or different places on their journey, and they're not, you know, I don't care about non-dual awareness or blah, 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 or finding God. I want to get through college and make good grades so I can go to a good graduate school or something like that, which is totally legitimate. And that's why the Stealing Flow tracks are really extraordinary. And they're really state inducing. You know, they help you get into states of flow and almost superhuman performance, whether you're, just, you know, creating, writing, reading, thinking, sports, etc., arts, music, and that's tremendous. And or maybe you're just trying to get well, or you're trying to overcome trauma and depression and PTSD and all these things. Stuff is totally valid for that also. However, in the traditional, you know, meditative practice, or from the great traditions, Hindu and yoga and the Sufi and Christian and everything, the ultimate goal of meditative practice was enlightenment, or God consciousness, or many, many, many ways of saying it. But as Shakespeare said, a rose by any other name is still a sweet, right? So if you call it the Great Enlightenment, you call it, or the Great Liberation, Great Enlightenment, ultimate self, God, mind, I don't know, all of this stuff, we're basically talking about the same thing. And at that point, you realize who and what you really are at the deepest level, always have been, always will be, and are now, even beyond time. I mean, time is just a dimension that comes out of this stuff. It's not the thing, it's time that it exists in. It's an element of that. Then that's kind of cool, you know. And because why? Well, because, you know, all of our fear comes from the other, you know, the bad guys that we don't want to let into the United States, or, you know, the bad guys that live across the street, or your mother-in-law, or, you know, or whatever your particular version of that is. But when in these deep spiritual states, when you really realize that there's only one person here, you know, and all these wacky things that we're doing to each other, we're doing to ourselves, you know, there's only one self here. And that really changes the story. And I think in the beginning, you just kind of touch into that, and it starts to, oh, wow. You're aware of that as a reality, but then you go back, you know, and then your regular ego walk around and knock into tables and get your feelings hurt, and, you know, have good days, bad days, and stuff like that. But the more that you keep practicing, and the more that you kind of tap into that state on a regular basis, well, that begins to insinuate and stabilize itself into whatever developmental stage you're at in your various, you know, capacities that you're working on. So that's really what happens over time and effort. And I think the story of just the instant enlightenment, you know, ding, you know, you're on the park bench, you get struck by lightning, and then, you know, you're Eckhart Tolle for the rest of your life, is a myth. You know, even Eckhart Tolle, and I've listened to him, he says, you know, when I'm out on stage doing all the teaching, I'm just nerdy little me. You know, it's like we have these moments where we understand that. And we're always, you know, as long as we're in this body, we're going to be human beings. And I think that's kind of sweet and affectionate. But we can be wiser, we can be more loving, we can be happier, and we can be spiritually mature. And maturing, it's a process, okay? So, with all the tools and the understanding and the great teachers and the great books and the great technologies, we can get a lot of really good stuff done, potentially more than any other generations ever have had the opportunity to do. And of course, we're setting up the opportunities for generations that come to us. And so maybe the work that it took me a lifetime to get to 60 years old and what I've achieved, people will be kicking in at 12 or 13, you know, and it's like, and moving on from there. So that's the hope, that if we grow up, if we evolve, as we're talking about in our website, Integral Recovery, the journey of integral recovery, the process, and this, we got this from Ken Wilber, and you got it from somewhere, but it's the process is waking up, all right, realizing your true nature, your being. We're talking about that being historically the purpose of deep meditative work, and the other part is growing up, because growing up into the highest stages of your development, how you understand the world, because you will, as Ken Wilber has pointed out to us, you will understand these powerful state experiences by whatever level you're at, because those are the tools you have to interpret the experience. So it's very important that we grow up these highest levels of our own compassion and wisdom and understanding. So there's two things going on. There's the experience of a progressive deep meditative experience, but there's also the process of growing up into ego mature human beings at the highest level that's available to us on an evolutionary scale, because at those top levels is where the answers are going to come from ultimately for the conditions. I mean, it's super complex conditions that we're facing as a species. So hope we don't blow each other up. We can evolve through these things. And we have a chapter in the book we're writing on the answers to all these problems are developmental, and it's so true. It's like you have to get to a world-centric stage for any religion to actually be a help in uniting us at this period, and not just being another divisive thing. Well, I believe in Jesus and you believe in Allah, so let's go slaughter each other, which is what we've done in the past, and it happens, still happening. So we have to get the play to where we realize, oh, wait, these are different expressions of God, and God is in all things, everything, immanent, and everyone, and I better behave and get with the program, So, yeah. So you want to riff on any of this, Doug? I've been talking for a while.
So starting to realize that through meditation, that's exactly why meditation is such a powerful catalyst for development, because you get glimpses of these things, even if they're not yet stabilized, through the practice of meditation, through continuing to do it. Maybe you'll get a peek here and there, and in those moments, and you realize that we're all connected, that's exactly what catalyzes the development, realizing that we're not so different after all, that we're all part of the same humanity, part of the same planet, part of the same larger cosmos. I am this and always was and always will be comes from that. As you said, you initially at least interpret it through the lens that your culture has given you to interpret it from, that your religion, that your parents, that your society has given you to interpret it from. But the longer you spend in those states too, you start to realize that there's something different about it. There's something not going on here, and maybe there's more to the story. And that's where the shift in levels begins to come from, really. And it does start to stabilize, and there's higher and higher to go, but it's a process of returning to it too. In traditional shamatha practice, for example, where you're focused on the still point of the breath, your mind wanders and you bring it back, and you bring it back, and you bring it back. And it's in the returning that the meditation happens. And that is the same with state experience in general. It's returning to the state and returning to the state.
Yeah. And returning to the focus of your meditation. And that's not, oh, you're having a bad meditation because you have to keep returning. No, that is the practice that strengthens the brain to be able to focus. And, the ego does all kinds of weird stuff. When you first start meditating, sometimes you'll start going into, especially with this technology, you'll start going to these non-dual stuff, and your mind will, the Zen, they have this thing, mind, body, drop. All of a sudden you're in this place where the body doesn't seem to have anything to do with anything in your mind. And it's like, if that's what you've been identified with your whole life, all of a sudden it's like, that's just like, poof, you can get terrified. Give me my mind and my body back. Thank you very much. And, that's why it's important, as we do become inner practitioners using powerful contemplative tools and practice, that we also educate ourselves about the different states that are going to happen. In other words, when I first started using this technology about 12 years ago, in September it'll be 12 years, 9/11 today I started, interestingly enough. It's just interesting. It had nothing to do with that. I had, in my first week, I had a very powerful class 5 non-dual experience. And I'd had some spiritual experiences over the years with psychedelics and non-psychedelics, but I'm God haunted, and had these powerful experiences. But when that happened, because I had a master's degree in transpersonal psychology and I'd been interested in spirituality, I knew exactly what was happening, and it wasn't psychosis. That it was a good thing, The presence was, it was all very loving and perfect and beautiful and liberating. So I'm not saying that was like a stable, I walked, that never went away, but it's something that really deeply impressed me in my work, my inner work of my pain and my trauma and my depression, et cetera. And it kicked it to a new level, and has been kind of a foundation of my practice in my life since then. It's been deepened and stabilized with practice and experiences of it in the ongoing years. But it was a big breakthrough. And the point is I knew what was going on, so I wasn't just like flipped out, because we're really not taught in school or in church this stuff, because most of the Christian stuff, with the exception of some esoteric brands or stuff you might find in some monasteries, has largely neglected contemplative practice, and meditation and stuff. And it just got, with the Protestant Reformation, it said to hell with the monasteries and hell with all this, priests and popes and cardinals and bishops, and let's just read the scripture, which we now have available in our language, and we'll just let God speak to us, which is kind of cool. But they also blew off and destroyed and rejected the deep contemplative practices, with maybe the exception of the Quakers. Anyway, I'm not going to big old thing on the history of Christianity, but, props to the Quakers. Great group, great history, continue doing work almost in the shadows for all of us for centuries now. So great group of people. So are there any comments or questions at this point?
Well, that's yeah, I was gonna add, John, that's one of the benefits of the interconnected world that we're moving into now, is that we can, of course, bring all these things together, and the things that different cultures did well over the years. So we can return to that focus on inner contemplative practice, and it's a beautiful thing. I was doing meditation practice this morning. My standard is sort of a shamatha vipassana combination practice that is outlined in The Mind Illuminated. But today I did something a little bit different, listening to PMP3, and I was focusing on the feeling of spaciousness. Not thinking about spaciousness, but focusing on the feeling of spaciousness externally. And that was, a pretty powerful practice for getting into non-dual experience, I have found, on its own. But what really kicked it this time was suddenly I shifted from a spaciousness of space to spaciousness of time. Wow, that was interesting.
What tracks were you using?
I'm doing, this morning I did tier 3 of PMP3. So 3.1 and 3.2. Didn't make it the full hour because I had stuff to do, but
yeah. I started out, by the way, I did your warm up from Stealing Flow, which I do almost every morning when I'm taking Lucy out, my dog, to go on a run. So I have my things in, and by the time I get back to meditate, I'm ready to rock. And then I did workout ecstasy, deep ecstasy, and deepest ecstasy, and I finished off with 3.2. PMP 3.2 was just like really powerful. And I had a question here. It says, are you getting this class 5 experience from somewhere? Just classification, just curious. I was a wilderness guide for many years, okay? And when you're in the rafting world, anyway, they refer to the river like maximum as far as boating down it with the most powerful currents and waves as being class 5. Has nothing to do with transpersonal psychology. I just took that from river tripping and applied it to it's not the classification system that Ken Wilber uses by any means. It's just me saying that. But yeah, what I meant is a very, very powerful, like maximum, just like ultimate kind of awakening, opening experience.
Non-dual encounter of the third kind.
Yeah, that's what, let's see, I was talking about it one time with a friend of mine, Diane Hamilton, is a Zen teacher. And I said, I had this waking. She said, it's not awakening, it's an opening. And I said, okay, I can buy that. I don't know if I'm awake all the time, but I was definitely open. So, yeah, hope that helps, David. Thank you. And we have some more questions coming in.
Let's see. Okay.
the FW, wondering why or what data you use to support it in your book. FW stimulator, is that the CES device? Creating electrical stimulation? Sorry, David, you missed it. You will never get that answer for the rest of your life. And it was really deep. Yeah, well, that's really interesting. I suppose you're talking about the, yeah, sorry, David. Yeah, I'm sorry, the Fisher-Wallace, thank you. Yeah, I was using other devices along those lines, and a lot of, concurrent with addiction, and almost all of my students, they're also depressed. And so I found out about this in my, researching and stuff like that. And, they some use ear clips and everything. And I heard about Fisher-Wallace where they use the wet sponges. And yeah, I think it works great with what we're doing. And there's a lot of data. I mean, there's a lot of money that was put into this by Fisher-Wallace. And so they have a lot of, studies they've done, and really significant studies with addiction. If they're using that with just a standard 12-step program, that the success rates are much higher than they're not using it. Now, it's not the Fisher-Wallace or the cranial electrical stimulation stuff is not a contemplative tool. Okay, you won't just you feel your little zzz here, but it does seem to. Well, they're not really sure what it does, but it does seem to make the brain function better, and it seems to have more access to healthy, feel good, be well, formerly depleted neurochemistry that's depleted in the brain of addicts and also depressives. Really seems to help that in most people. So if you're using that, not all of this stuff works for everyone. Even our iAwake stuff, we don't know what the figures are, but it probably works really radically well for like 75% of us, and maybe 25% not so much for whatever reasons. So the same thing with the Fisher-Wallace stuff. But when it works, man, it really works good. And our technology does some of the same things that Fisher-Wallace does. But when you have it as a yes and, not just this or that, I think it works together and works really well. So what are your experiences? Is it working for you?
I really can't attribute it to just that, because I've been doing so many things, as far as these calls every week, PMP every day, sometimes just once a day, sometimes twice a day. Now I've started using Louise Hay's morning meditation and evening meditation. And that's really good because a lot of the anger issues I have and negativity, like her thing is all positive, blessing your furniture and your food, sending love to all the places you're going to be. And then at the end of the day, letting go of everything, and everything's exactly how it is. It's just so positive, and I'm trying to get into that mindset. And I think I'm doing a really damn good job because
brilliant, good.
I've been able to be there for a lot of people that I didn't know were struggling with things until these past 26 days where I've been sober and clear-headed and feeling lighter. So that's been really helpful. Just everything I do is helping, I think. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, it's really good that you're, and that's a nice thing about this technology and early recovery is that you feel the results really quickly. You start feeling better and things just start working out. And sometimes traditional, recovery programs, they just don't work fast enough, and people get bummed out and depressed, and they tend to go back and relapse.
Honestly, I think the AA and the NA model for me actually hindered me for many years, because I think subconsciously it harbored a lot of guilt in me and shame. If you didn't do it exactly this way, and you didn't find like the perfect sponsor and go through all 12 steps, then you were fucked. Like you were gonna fail, or you weren't gonna do it the right way. And because I was so broken, and because there was so many like people in there that were like maybe they were clean, but you could tell they were not. I don't want to say they weren't good people, but just had this not good vibe about it. So it just didn't have that holistic, all-around approach that the meditation does, and everything I'm working on now. So I haven't gone to it. I wanted to go to an AA meeting just for the support, but what I found in my area is Smart Recovery for now, and so I've been going to those meetings on Monday.
And has that been helpful?
Very, yeah, because it's very logical. And then I also share all the stuff that I learned from you guys, and I share the book. I bring the book, I tell them about the meditation, about the call. I get emails and sending information to a couple people. Even if it's one person at a time.
And are they open to what you're talking about?
Yeah, because they see how it lines up with their model. But I think a hard part still for a lot of people is when I start saying the word like spiritual or meditation, it's like, oh God, and when you have so many horrible experiences, God's not in that picture. So it's hard to like bring back.
Like Star Wars language, the Force.
Yeah.
They probably really, I don't care what the language is.
Yeah.
And that's really good. And yeah, and I do understand that about AA and 12 steps. And if you read like the first chapter of the big book, the introductory chapter, Bill was like, hey, this is what we discovered. We've been, when we wrote the book, it had been about 3.5 years they've been doing it. He was very humble, said, so take whatever works for you here, and very invitational, very non-cult like, very like, hey, we're working on this, a lot of humility and stuff. But as over the years, it's gotten a little more, a little more structured, and in the interpretation of 70 years of practitioners. And often at certain developmental levels, that's really useful. You don't need, a guy that's just getting off heroin to have a bunch of choices and blah, blah, blah. You just need to, hey, work the program, shut up, will be your auxiliary brain until your brain starts functioning again. And I understand that kind of structure, but it also can be off-putting, especially for people who are more intelligent or, have been maybe suffered adversely from religion of different, there's all kinds of, I've written about it in the book, and if it works for you, great, because there's a lot of good stuff there. But if it doesn't mean you're doomed to die of an overdose in a gutter someplace. There's other ways to get there. And it sounds like you're finding something that really works for you, and it's really great work you're doing.
I would suggest too that the most important thing is the community of it. I had a very similar challenging experience with AA, but what you're getting from Smart Recovery is a real good community. And, if they're output by spiritual language, you don't certainly have to use it with them. Continue to work that stuff on your own and appreciate the support of the people that you meet there, because it sounds like there's some good ones. I would suggest too that if you do talk about meditation, you can just approach it from a different place. In other words, we talk about growth through the levels, and you can talk to them on the rational level, like meditation is really beneficial to your neurochemicals and resetting some of these things that addiction has messed up. So I guess that would be my suggestion on there, and just really glad to hear that you have found that, and hope you will continue to do that and continue your practices. I got a lot out of what you were saying about doing the healing and releasing practices too, and loving everything. I have been working with the profound releasing quite a bit this year, and that can be a really helpful one too, letting go of some of the things that creep up throughout the day. I find that's a good one to do in the evening before bed. Things have kind of built up during the day and you're stressed out, and doing the profound releasing at night is a real good way to let all that go and kind of chill out. Also powerful as a relapse prevention tool. You can just throw it on when or if you ever feel the calling for it, and it gets you into a different place quickly.
Yeah, and me suffering with depression, I learned that when, the depression would start coming on every once in a while, that if I would do like a 2-hour meditation, with iAwake stuff, and before other technologies before that, or sometimes even longer, 2.5, 3 hours, that it would really intensify the depression and the darkness, and then it would release, and I'd be okay. So you can do the same thing if you're starting to feel kind of, itchy, or the addict voice starts playing games with you. And it's really nice about meditation is because mindfulness increases, you begin to be able to identify the addict voice as opposed to your, the good angel or your deeper wisdom voice and all these things. You start, well, that's one channel and it's broadcasting and it wants me to get loaded. And I know that's not what I'm supposed to do. So I'm not going to, entertain that one right now. I'm going to dial that one down and listen to the, the voices that are, having me do what I need to do to survive and to prosper and be happy. Yeah. What episode have we released, as far as, we record a few ahead, as far as the podcast goes.
We just just released episode 19 on Friday, and I just finished editing the video for episode 20, which is the one with Dr. Adam Gorman. It's going to be a real good episode.
Oh, he's awesome. Yeah. And one that we did last weekend, we did three. We normally do 3 episodes at a time. And Doug gave his personal story, which of course, he's the guy that does all the editing. So I hope it all stays there. But it was really, really powerful and really beautiful. So check that out in the coming weeks.
Tell you what's interesting is I continued to think about it the rest of the day, and it's stayed with me ever since. Already there are so many things that I wish I had expressed a little bit differently or explained a little bit more. And that's the case with those things. But you do it anyway. You go through it anyway, and in doing so, you learn and get some perspective on it.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so much that in our stories that are universal, that we can relate to. I mean, I certainly could. And honesty, just beautiful honesty is a gift, because not only that we tap into somebody else's reality in life, it also helps us to go deeper with ourselves. And I had some of my biggest breakthroughs in group processing when I was in grad school and whatnot, when other people would be really honest and talk deeply, and then something would release from me, from my life, that I wasn't talking about, but this person's courage to go deep opened up for me. So it's good. So are any other, how are we doing on time? I have no idea.
37 after. We could probably talk for a few more minutes if anybody has any additional questions here. We're just talking about the frequencies in the releasing tracks, which are good. The profound releasing program that I was talking about is Theta frequencies as well. That one's kind of a guided meditation hypnosis.
John, in the future or near future, do you have any plans for training people to become IR coaches out in the field, like around the States and
you bet.
more?
Yeah, that what we kind of wanted to do was to build up the podcast, so that we have enough people that are tuned into that, and then so it would become financially viable to do the class. But yeah, it's been our intention from the very beginning, and we got this great team together now, and we're so excited about it. We just we're much better as a power trio than we are as a duo or a solo. It seems to just be one of those real synchronistic things, and we truly look forward to doing our podcast together. And of course, I look forward to this every day. Those are two of my work things that I do that I look forward to. I really enjoy.
Yeah, the podcast has been amazing, so in depth, and then just to hear all the different variations of your stories and what you've all been through personally puts the meaning behind it, because I think for a lot of addicts, it's hard to reach them. There's like, oh, you don't understand, or you haven't been through what I've been through.
Yep. Yeah, and with my students, I'm clear in the book. I'm not an addict. That's not my deal. I did have I started doing drugs pretty early when I was 13 and 14, and I was starting to smoke marijuana and do psychedelics, and maybe there was some drinking mixed in with that. It was 1969, 70, basically. 1970, 71, 72 was my drug career. And then I joined this fundamentalist Christian thing, which is a whole nother story that took me through my whole adolescence, suffering from that, but not from alcohol and drugs. So it really rescued me at a time when I was really vulnerable, took me away from that. So all the awful stuff that happened with that, it was a great teacher and kept me, out of the drug and alcohol world, thank God. So, yeah, but anyway, when I was sharing with my students, because of the depth of my depression, they were like, yeah, you get us,
Yeah,
exactly. I listen to these stories. And I'm pretty empathetic, and so when you listen to and you work with the families, and, you go to enough funerals and blah, 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 you get it. And I think that you don't necessarily have to be an addict to work with addicts in a real heart open, wise way, but you do have to open your heart up to the suffering and your brain up to listening and understanding the patterns. And I think, and in my book, I said, of all the stuff I've read and the science and this and that, it was listening to the stories of my students that truly, taught me, my biggest teacher. And of course, my beloved older brother was very depressed, and he got addicted to painkillers, right? Because it kills pain. You know, it does temporarily help. But anyway, he ended up committing suicide. So, you know, stuff is like, none of us are 2 degrees removed from this stuff, in my experience, unless you live on, you know, I don't know, some other planet. So, yeah, and thanks. A lot of we get David about. He says he's been recommending the podcast to the clients who are in recovery. We're finding a lot of that. Dr. Adam Gorman was on. He says, well, a lot of his young guys, and he's working up in the Northeast where they're just having this plague of opioids. And by the way, the plague is also in Utah now. I watch the local news, and you know they're making big busts, but it is spreading out again. And the main pushers are the doctors, unfortunately. And we were up in Seattle visiting my sister-in-law and her family, and she had this operation. Her Achilles tendon broke. They had to put it back together, and they gave her like 50 of these painkillers in a bottle. You know, powerful stuff. I don't know if it was oxycodone, but a very powerful one. And she said, "Well, I thought not to get addicted, is it?" Oh, yes, it is. Man, 10 of those can get you addicted. I mean, this stuff is awful. So the ignorant doctors, you know, and I call you ignorant, and I hope you're insulted and you feel shame about it. So you change your ways, because you're really killing a lot of people. And 80%, at least in the Northeast, the figures they've done, of people that started or are using heroin now started with prescriptions unwisely given them by physicians. So doctors need to wake up to this stuff, and maybe they are, but it's too little too late right now. We're dealing with a huge epidemic, and people are dying. I think like 30 people on the average of a month OD on opioids in Utah. It's horrible. Anyway, got me on that rant. Yeah, right, Tejas, exactly. Use opioids the least possible time. Say hi to Pam. Have a great day. You know, right. And I love opioids. It's really nice to know if you know, have something, your leg just got lopped off or something, you know, like you're in combat, they can give you this shot that'll get you to the hospital and everything, but it's medicine. It's not food. Okay. And thank God we have it. And it's a real blessing. But if it's used with the wisdom, or somebody's, you know, dying of terminal cancer or something, for crying out loud, you know, you don't want to sit there and suffer. But it's not. You know, you got to realize that the down parts of this stuff too. I mean, it's a blessing and a curse, and it's more of a curse right now because we have not used it respectfully and with wisdom. So, but a lot of this stuff that we're working, the brain technology, is also very good at managing pain. So there's a lot of good things that we're learning that aren't that can be used, you know, in addition to. And we found that, I mean, and just anecdotally, working with clients and people reporting that if they're on antidepressants and stuff, that they seem to actually work better when you're using this technology, and they find that oftentimes they can reduce the dosage, or eventually, you know, with their, you know, the consult of their physician, to get off the antidepressants altogether. Man, I was taking a whole, they prescribed a, you know, whole M&M bowl full of antidepressants for me when I was suffering, and after I still kept getting worse, and I couldn't work, and so I couldn't afford them. So I said, you know, I'm gonna have to find a way to either get well and survive, or you know, without these things, because it's, and they were making me feel very strange. And you know, they've never done, and they normally prescribe antidepressants, not just 1 or 2 or 3, you know, but they give you kind of a fruit cocktail of these things, and there's never been tests of, you know, the effects when they mix them. It's more the doctors just kind of anecdotally adding a little this and see what works. So anyway, it's a long subject, and I will like back off. Anything else, Doug?
Well, that's where the exercise and meditation are so powerful. I mean, for me, I was a chronic relapser for years and years. You know, every time I would detox, I would swear it was the last, and I was never going to go through that again. And, you know, I did, and I would not wish that fate on anybody. Finally getting it together was exercise and meditation, which stimulates your neurochemicals in a very different way. There's a real reaction there. But, you know, those two practices combined with hope, needed something to hope for, and putting all that together, which the Integral Recovery Program helps you do, is something that I wish that I had way back then. It works because there's not a tolerance effect. When we work with PMP more and more, for example, you adjust to the strength of the program, your brain starts to adapt, and it doesn't become so overpowering anymore. But there's not a tolerance that's happening to the benefits of that state change. Those state changes, every time you listen to the tracks, aren't dose dependent. And you don't build a tolerance to entering those deep meditative states, which is one of the reasons that it's healthy to continue to use. And the more you work with it, the better your body becomes at generating those states and those chemicals in a beneficial way. At least that's the experience that I had, and that's why I'm such a convert with it.
Right, and over time, as you use iAwake, I think you begin to realize you have to practice also. In other words, in the beginning, you just listen to them, and amazing things happen. But as you continue, you learn about discipline, and you learn how to focus, and you do a lot of the practices that people have been using for thousands of years, or maybe new things that we're developing right now. But the practice and these technologies, as far as when we use them for deep spiritual meditative practice, they facilitate practice. In other words, we can use our discipline. And if you want to do a Zen type of practice, I use centering meditation most of the time, and I consider now at this stage of my life, or this stage of my practice, prayer and meditation are kind of the same thing. And I would say that meditation maybe is a preparation for deep prayer or deep contemplative prayer, which doesn't mean you're giving God your to-do list or your I want list, but it means you're just opening yourself to the presence of this deepest part of our self, and all selves. So let's see.
Well, anybody else have any questions here?
Okay.
Any other thoughts from you, John?
Blessedly, no. So yeah, well, let's do a wrap. And anyway, it's awesome talking to you guys again. Thanks for showing up. And let people know about the podcast, or this thing too, but definitely the podcast, so we can get enough people in there that we can start offering some courses and stuff like that. And spread the word, and keep practicing. And if it seems like it sucks, that's okay. Sometimes meditation's hard. Sometimes it's absolute bliss. Doesn't matter. When you're a master, you just keep practicing. You keep moving. You keep growing and going. So anyway, thanks, folks. And God willing, we'll be here next time. Do it again.
Hold on just a second here. Maybe might have a question. Our brainwaves are not used to staying at a steady state for one amount of time, so it's really a difference between entraining a very specific state and getting into a state that is more stealing flows, designed in a way that it kind of catches the natural drifts as you're approaching a state, and when your brain starts to slip in either direction from where you're supposed to be, it catches you and brings you back in, and it utilizes the natural changes, the large scale state changes, say from beta to alpha to theta, and those full range changes to tap into the most effective way to drop between them to get to where you need to be. In other words, we talk about the cycle of flow and the struggle phase followed by release and then flow. And so using warm up before stealing flow guides you through that process in the way that makes it easier to get into the flow state. That's why it works so well before using it with PMP as well. Working with steady state tracks, though, is a more effective way to train you to enter those more effectively too. So in other words, if you listen to the stealing flow track more and more, you'll be able to drop into it more when you hit those places naturally. If you listen to just PMP and get used to hitting the delta state, you'll be able to hit it more effectively when you use the dynamic track first, because your brain knows what to do.
Yeah, and I think if to have a really integral practice, you have to be able to be comfortable and do the work as needed with all these different states. And sometimes you listen to, you blend the different states, because often, for example, when you're in deep delta, there's also like alpha and stuff up there to keep you awake so you just don't go to sleep. So you wanted this deep deep, relaxed, open state, but you also want the alertness. And a lot of this is based on everybody who's creating these things they're kind of scientists and they're practitioners also. So a lot of it comes from our experience of doing it, and then we create it. And I've often said that creating an iAwake track is half science and half art. Half of it's this kind of intuitive understanding, blah blah blah, from your own experience. The other is just dealing with the science of what's going on. So it's a really nice mixture. And when those two things come together, man, you've got a great tool. And I think that's what happened with Stealing Flow. Just really cool. And I love the warm up, how it takes me through all these different states, and I'm just ready to rock by the time I get prepared. Well, what I'm using it for. I also find it really useful when I'm driving. Now, I also live in a very isolated area where there's no traffic or anything, so I wouldn't do it in Manhattan. But when I'm out, on the road and stuff, like, it keeps me really alert, and I think it makes my driving better and safer. Yeah, well, that's a good question. It seems to emphasize the dynamism. If that is the future of entrainment, is certainly part of it. And who knows? What's going to develop as chaos theory shows us. When this evolution does happen, it's always more beautiful and more complex and more interesting. But it's really hard to predict which way that's going to go. But it certainly could be. And if the future is now, it's something we're definitely working with.
Yeah.
The cover art's amazing. Amen. It's beautiful. Okay, well, let's wrap it again. I have to say goodbye all over again. Twice in 15 minutes. So, hey, love you guys, and keep practicing. We're all in this together. It's like we're pushing this envelope that needs to be pushed, and hopefully, us as pioneers, practitioners, and developers, that this technology will spread all over the world. Because what I love about it is so scalable. It's using the devices that we all already have. We all got earbuds. We all have some kind of phone or recording device or headphones or something, so we don't have to sell a bunch of hardware. We can get this stuff directly into people's hands and they can use it. So helps get the word out, and big part of it is just people seeing the shifts and changes in you. So thank you very much. Any questions? I'm answering emails all the time. Email us, and we'll see you next time, yeah? Or at least feel your presence. God bless you guys. Thank you.